It's scary when you're an entrepreneur and you're going to have a baby and you're trying to take care of yourself and the baby and your business. It's a lot. It's definitely a lot. My situation was a good reminder to always remember to take care of yourself. The world of entrepreneurship it is a roller coaster. It's up and down. You can do your best to plan and to project and to know when clients are coming in, but it's not always a perfect science.
Welcome back to this season of The Climb, a journey where listening to your heart reveals your true potential. With the Intermountain philosophy, on this show, we're here to teach you how to embrace the limitless nature of growth.
Women are reshaping the world, driven by their dreams. Our mission is to empower you to listen to your heart, pursue those dreams, to create a community where women like you can begin the climb to true success together.
In a world of comparisons, reconnect with why your work matters through inspiring stories of female entrepreneurs all around the world.
Discover what it means to build your legacy with authenticity and face your inner challenge with confidence.
Join us on this podcast as we explore how to become fearless, unleashing your true potential for you and your business.
If you choose to accept, your adventure awaits.
Ready to climb your inner mountain? The climb starts now. Welcome to this week's Climb. I'm so excited to have Erin Coles with us today. We spoke back in May, and I remember after that conversation thinking, okay, the second I start recording season 2, she must be on our podcast. So welcome, Erin.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I've listened to so many episodes and you're just such a great interviewer and they've just been so inspirational. So I'm very honored to be here today with you.
Oh, I appreciate that so much. Thank you. It's been a fun journey myself because being a host is much more challenging than I realized when I took this on. The guest is one thing, but like the whole active listening, it's tough.
Well, you're doing a fantastic job.
Thank you. So it was fun when we first spoke, actually. We both actually just started new roles within women empowerment organizations that we were already a part of. So I'm really excited to hear how it's going. But first, you have such a unique and incredible backstory and journey of entrepreneurship. I would love to hear kind of start at the beginning and learn more about you. So what is your backstory?
Yeah, great question. So I grew up in a tiny town in northern New York, lots of farmland, one stoplight kind of small town. And I really, at that point, had dreamed of being a Broadway star. When I was young, I was involved in a lot of musicals. And as I was growing up, I started to get involved more in leadership positions, the yearbook club and different things like that. And when I went to college, I ended up doing 2 separate degrees, one in theater and one in business, because I just couldn't quite make a choice to choose one. I had the creative side of my brain and the business side of my brain that I wanted to nurture. So I got 2 degrees. And then when I graduated, I moved down to New York City where my then fiance, now husband, now he lived. And so I got a job as an executive and personal assistant and worked at a speech coaching company for a couple of years. And during that time, my husband and I were planning our wedding, and both being in the music space and scene and being creatives while also both having sort of a business background. As we were looking for bands for our wedding, knowing we wanted a live band and we couldn't find one we loved, we decided to start our own band, our own wedding band in New York City. And so that was 11 and a half years ago now. So we started that business and built the business out of everything that we wanted, but couldn't find for ourselves in a band. So it has been a wild and crazy journey. And within the first few years of being in business, I got my MBA, but I also realized a lot of the very specific business training through programs like my college education as well as my master's were not super focused on entrepreneurship. They were more focused on tenets of business. And so I really wanted to sort of just learn more about how to be an entrepreneur. So I started seeking out programs that were specific to entrepreneurs. And I also started looking for communities of entrepreneurs as well that I could hopefully be a part of and learn more about and kind of just be in the world of other people. I just had never grown up thinking I was going to be an entrepreneur. It wasn't like on my radar. So I think it was like a lot of things, at least to me, were like surprising, like the amount that you work. Like I was like, oh, I thought you could make your own schedule, but then you work like 24/7 and you're just responsible for everything. And, it was just different than what I had expected my, career would look like. So I ended up joining a couple of communities that were really focused around female founders and bringing female founders together. So one of those is Million Dollar Women, which was really focused around providing business training for growth and scale, and also a community of other founders. And then I also joined a community, sort of a group community that turned into more of a very solidified community. We Are Women Owned, that was focused more on providing visibility for female founders. And I was so excited about both of those that I dove in and volunteered with both. I was like, how can I help? What can I do? I just want to be a part of this. It was something that, felt very mission aligned to who I was as a person. So I just wanted to do everything I could to help both of those companies really thrive and, find more people to join and all of that fun stuff. So I did that. And then a couple years ago, I guess almost 3 years ago now, I stepped away from my business to when my husband and I had our first kid, and decided two of us being in the event space and world and entrepreneurs was going to be a little bit difficult to maintain with a kid as well. Just, like I said, working 24/7. And also, especially with the business we had, it was very focused around weekends. Weddings happen on weekends. So there was just a lot going on in that world. So I decided to step back from the business, and I got a full-time job as a director of operations at a digital marketing and web development agency. And so I was there for a couple of years, and then ended up stepping back from that role. And where I am now, which I'm very excited about, is executive director of the Million Dollar Women Fund, which is the nonprofit arm of the company that I mentioned previously, Million Dollar Women, that I took part in years and years ago and had been volunteering at for many years. And the focus at the fund is providing scholarships to women of color entrepreneurs to take those business training programs, as women of color entrepreneurs face greater hurdles in building their businesses. They have less access to capital. They tend to make less money overall. Just, way more hurdles to get past. So I've been doing that for a few months now, and it's just really, really wonderful to do something that is so incredibly mission aligned with who I am.
Wow, that is amazing. And there's so many things to unpack here. So I'm going to start back in the beginning a little bit with, because I think it's amazing. So the Metropolitan Players, that's the wedding band, the name. And so when I think of wedding bands, I don't necessarily think of a business, right? And so it's funny when you're saying you didn't see yourself being an entrepreneur, but then you guys turned something into an actual business. So can you tell us a little bit more about how did that come about from just being a singular band to a full-on business that's still, and you guys have won awards year after year too, right? So
Yeah.
This is incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, my husband and I started the band together, and I am a very cautious, risk averse kind of a person that kind of takes things slow and all of that. And my husband is more of a risk taker, and he's like, let's just do this, let's push. And we've just been a really good balance, because I think I was more of let's keep it small, let's grow incrementally, and he was like, hey, if we can do it once, we can do it twice, and we can do it 3 times, we can do it 4 times, we can build this, we can do more than, more and more and more. And I was like, okay, I guess let's try it. So, it was nice to have that balance and that push a little bit, because I probably would have kept it much smaller. But we sort of realized that once we had a model to work from, that it was replicatable, that it was something that we could continue to build. So that's sort of what we did, is as soon as we knew that we could do it once, that we could do the same thing twice on the same day. And so we ended up, my husband having performed in wedding bands before and having a background on what that was like, and us also having been from the front side as couples planning our wedding and working with vendors and looking at wedding bands, we kind of tried to build out the components of it in a way that was a mix of comfortable for couples and something that could be understandable for people looking to book the band, as well as really streamlined and workable on the back end. So what we did is we built it as a collective, where we have a handful of people per instrument. So let's say we have like 4 drummers, we have like 4 keyboard players, 4 guitar players, and they're all trained the same way, all learn the same repertoire. They all get to, play with each other, rehearse with each other, and all of that. So basically everybody can be interchangeable. Everybody is unique. I don't want it to sound like anybody can be, pulled in and out. Of course, everyone has their strengths. But what was great about it is that the world of like performing musicians is also one that like when a great opportunity arises, like the person's going to take that great opportunity. Or if someone's sick and can't make it, like they have to stay home. So there were all these things that we wanted to guard against that like, for example, one of the people who was in the band at the very beginning for the first couple of years ended up being on Hamilton on Broadway, and she's still there. And that was a great opportunity. And it's like, she's not going to not take that so she can perform in the wedding band. And we were grateful to have her. But it was great when she left that we had people trained to do exactly the same thing, that there wasn't a hole in the business. So that's kind of how we built it, just to make sure that it was sustainable, it was scalable, and that we could really work with our couples as well to help customize bands for their wedding, so that if they liked a particular person that they saw on our website and our videos or something like that, they could request that they are there. We do everything we can to make sure that they're there. So it gave like flexibility to the couples and helped us really remain efficient on the back end as well.
That's amazing. I love it. You had a need, you figured out how to fix it, and then you figured out how to scale it in a way that is sustainable and scalable. It's so, and it's something like unique too. Like, it's not like an everyday type of business model that you would think of, but like, I love that you found something in a way, like you've built a business around something that you wouldn't normally think of. Because are there many organizations like yours? Is that...
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's hard to say. I think in New York City, like there are lots of wedding bands and they're all sort of built very differently. So some of them, I think like as you go outside of New York City, you find a lot more bands that are like groups of friends that are performing together or things like that. I think in New York City, it's a lot, definitely it's a pretty saturated market for wedding bands, but it is also something that can be done like on the side, like it doesn't have to be a full-time gig. So yeah, it's been a wild ride. And it's like, I think for my husband and I, we're both like very sentimental people and we love, and like, it's just a big part of like our story. And so like being a part of that day for other people, it's so joyful and so wonderful. The amount of, vows we've been able to hear and like parent dances we've seen. And I'm such a sap. I just sob all the time at these weddings. I see all these like beautiful moments happen. So yeah, it's been really good to be able to, the scaling part of it. One of the reasons we wanted to do that is because we knew we were creating something that was really magical with people who really were excited about performing and being a part of these weddings. And so it gave us the opportunity to just be a part of one of the most special days in people's lives and help celebrate those moments with their families. And, my husband and I always say, like, a wedding is the only time in your life that everybody who's there at that wedding will be together in one space ever. And it's just that one beautiful day where you have both sides of the family, chosen family and blood family, and you have all of your friends and the kids and the grandparents and everybody. And it's just, it's really, really a beautiful thing to be a part of a day like that.
That's so sweet. Well, so speaking of family and your husband, is it Drew? Is that his name?
Yes, Drew.
Yeah, Drew. So what is it like? How was it like working with your husband? I'm sure there were some challenges there. I'd love to hear, because that's something, I think it's beautiful. I think obviously that's like such a great partnership you have, but I'm guessing there were some roller coasters along the way.
Yeah, that's a very good guess, because that's very true. Yeah, you're not going to have any sort of partnership without a little bit of a roller coaster, but especially if you are trying to navigate being together as a couple and also running a business together, it's challenging for sure. I think like it's funny. We're both in our mid-30s now. Our birthdays are like 10 days apart. So we're exactly the same age, but we now have like way more perspective about our lives than we did when we were younger. When we were younger, we were very much like, we had a little bit of an ego about us. We thought we knew everything. Of course, it's like the opposite. You know nothing when you're like in your early 20s. And then when you get in your 30s, you're like, okay, now I'm like starting to get it. So we came at things like, we're also both very stubborn people. And we both had really good ideas. We happened to have very different ideas of how to run a business or like how we wanted things to run. And my focus was very like couple focused and like customer focused and marketing focused. And he was way more like focused on, the back end of things and how the music was going to sound and all these things. And sometimes those things were like at odds at times, like this thing wasn't going to work and also work in this realm. And so we definitely had moments where we were like totally on different pages. And so at the beginning, I think it was just like stumbling over all those moments of like, how do we navigate this? Like, how do we remain like, like kind and respectful and loving to each other as a couple and as business partners, while also like building a business and trying to maintain our relationship. So we like stumbled across that, I think for many years, just trying to figure out those nuances and where we fell. And I think like after time, what ended up helping us was really understanding like where each of our strengths lie. I think we were trying to both do everything and have an opinion about everything at the beginning. And then we got to a point where we were like, oh, okay, so Erin's really good at this and Drew's really good at this. Let's like be better about not only splitting our responsibilities, but respecting the opinion of the other person who is in charge of that component, because that's just what they're better at. So we kind of like fell into a better rhythm there. We also, I think what was really interesting and fun about the pandemic, which totally put our business on pause in a major way because it was all live performance and weddings, which just wasn't happening. It was a really, really fantastic opportunity for my husband and I to like reconnect as a couple. And we made, I think, like so much beautiful progress during that time of just like, we actually, our favorite restaurant in New York City, which just closed. I'm so sad. We were vegan for 8 years. It's this restaurant called Blossom. And we used to go there once they opened in July of 2020, after being closed for a few months for the pandemic, or June or July. We literally went every Friday for probably like 3 years to that restaurant for a date night. And like we held that very, very sacred, because that was our opportunity to connect as a couple. And so that was really, really beautiful, is like finding ways to connect in that way, and not like, maybe not talk about business all the time, even though it was on our minds all the time. But yeah, I mean, I think like we definitely had some stumbling blocks, and it was just a matter of like getting used to the rhythm and getting into it. And I can't remember if I mentioned this to you when we spoke before, but I always say too, like, in a weird way, I'm so grateful that we ran our first business baby together before we had real human children, because I think it prepared us in such an incredible way for being parents, because we already had gone so deep in knowing like what each of us is really good at and like how we can each contribute. And we also, rather than looking at us as being like on different pages about something, because we just think about things so differently, we started to recognize that like each of us having different perspectives was beautiful for our business and beautiful for raising kids. And that there's like this nice balance of who we are and how we do things that like actually meshes really well together if we stop looking at it as we're butting heads, and more of like, oh, look, like this person has these beautiful things about them and this person has these beautiful things about them. So I think it prepared us to navigate some of the challenges in parenthood, to have gone through a lot of those things in our business together.
That's amazing. Yeah, I can imagine like communication became very important during those times when you were initially butting heads, and then like translate that to being parents. Like that is the most important thing I can imagine, to like be able to communicate properly, especially if you're sleep deprived and have everything else still going on as it is. So
100%.
That's amazing. So was it during, I'm guessing we could dive into COVID a little bit about how you pivoted, but before that, so you talked about communities and joining them, other like female founded mentorship, that sort of thing. Like how did you think to start looking and seeking out this type of support? Was it in the beginning time of your business, or when was that?
Yeah, I would say it was probably like a couple years into the business. And I think like, it was like a time when we had, both my husband and I actually had gotten MBAs, I think at that point. Yeah. So a couple years into our business, both of us had an MBA, and I still felt like, how do I still feel alone sometimes? I'm like, that feels weird. I have a partner in my business, but I feel alone in this journey. And I think it was just because most of my peers were not entrepreneurs, and they had no idea the like sacrifices you make to be an entrepreneur and to do that sort of a thing. And so I was really looking for community. And also, like, I think that even with our business training, we both realized that there were some holes in like what we were doing as entrepreneurs versus some of like the things that we learned in business school. It was just like the marketing tenets you're going to learn in business school, for example, may work for like a massive corporation. But when you're like two people running a company, like boots on the ground, trying to do everything by yourself, like it's a little bit different. You don't have a whole team to like,
yeah.
yeah. So it's like, we kind of, it's not that we couldn't necessarily translate things, but I think we kind of hit a wall where we were like, okay, we've hit a wall in terms of like what we can do on our own. And I think we need some sort of support to like make it to that next step. So it was a mix of like wanting the like training around like what exactly we were doing, along with like the camaraderie of other people who knew what it was like to be an entrepreneur. That's always something that's huge for me, is like I kind of love to commiserate with other people and be like, you know what this is like, right? And they're like, yeah, I know what that's like. And you know that they know, you know, like if you tell a friend who has no idea of what it's like to be an entrepreneur about being an entrepreneur or these things that are really difficult, it kind of like goes over their head a little bit. And they're not to say they're not listening or trying to help or be supportive, but they just don't get it. So having that group of people that I could talk to that I knew could like totally understand what I was going through and how difficult it was to like find the right bookkeeper or like whatever it was, like it just really, really, I knew I needed that support.
Yeah, it's because it's lonely. Even if you have a partner, or you have someone that you can talk through at home with, whether you're actually working with them specifically, it's like, it's challenging. And so having a group of women and men, whatever that is, like it's important.
Yeah.
And it makes you feel a little less crazy, right?
Yes, 100%. You're like, oh my God, what I'm feeling is normal. It's huge.
That's amazing. So going back to the COVID side of things, because I know obviously, like you mentioned, I mean, weddings were at a complete standstill during COVID. How did you guys manage this? Like, how did you pivot and how did you emotionally go through that? Right?
Yeah. Wow. It's funny to think back to it because it feels like yesterday, but it's like how many years ago now? Like
it's almost 5 years ago.
It's insane.
I know time is warped right now.
Yeah, it makes no sense. But I think, you know, the beginning was the scariest part because, well, first of all, my husband got COVID, like the worst version of COVID. Like he was so sick. And we didn't know that it was COVID yet because you couldn't even test for it at that point. But he was so sick and like we were trying to figure out what was going on and like everything shut down. And, you know, we were all thinking like in a couple weeks we'll be fine. Like you know, that was the sentiment. So we were just kind of like, everything just got put on pause and it was kind of just really scary. But once we started to settle into the fact that like, hey, I think this thing's going to happen a little longer. And like my husband started to feel better and it got a little less scary. We just thought like, okay, how do we get through this as a company that's like not planning anything? So we did a lot of work around like messaging to our clients and messaging to the band and tried to really understand like what our options were, what people's options were, and how we could navigate all of this. And also like, what can we do in the meantime? So a couple things we did, we like basically talked to every one of our clients individually. And we said like, where are you guys at? Are you going to do a smaller situation sometime soon? Are you going to reschedule to next year or a year later? Or like, what are you looking to do? And so we kind of just continued to have conversations with our couples about what they wanted to do and whether they were going to reschedule, whether they were going to cancel, whether they were going to do something small. We encouraged our couples to continue to celebrate if they could, if there was a way that they felt comfortable doing so. We did a couple of virtual ceremonies, which was really, really beautiful, where we had like, my husband would play piano over iPhone, like FaceTime on a video, and we would like help play music for their ceremony while like the couple ended up getting married then and then planning their big celebration a couple years later. So we did that a few times and we just got creative with our couples about how we could continue to celebrate. And of course, like from our minds, and I think from their perspective, like if you have hired a wedding band, like you're ready for a big party. You wanted a big party. Like you know, it's not something that you're going to be like super okay with or comfortable with just being like, okay, fine, it'll just be the two of us or just my parents. You know, people still wanted to celebrate. So a lot of people, most of our clients, I would say, just rescheduled. What we also decided to do was ramp up education during that time. So we did a series called Met Player Mondays, where my husband and I sat down in front of a camera and just recorded tips about planning your wedding or selecting music for your wedding or different things that, you know, people might run into, or FAQs, like any of that stuff. We just like started churning out content, helpful content of like how to do this. And we also started talking specifically about ways to, like, as safely as you could at that point, like, have a wedding during COVID as we started to do them again. So it was an interesting year. It was a challenging year. I think we were very grateful that we had our best year yet the previous year. And so we had like a little bit in cash reserves to like get us through the year, because if we didn't have that, I think we would have been even more terrified. But we were able to just sort of sustain and like stay and just continue to provide hopefully helpful educational content, communication with our couples, communication with the band. And thankfully that year, I think we played, how many was it? Oh gosh, my memory now. I think it was like 7 or 8 weddings we ended up actually playing in 2020. Our smallest was 14 people. Our largest was about 25. So they were all very small, but it was really, they were just some of the best weddings we've played, because it was like people were getting together and hadn't gotten together for months. And it was just the biggest, beautiful release. So yeah, we kind of just held tight and did what we could to continue churning out content and continue to stay in touch with our couples. And then when things started to pick up, we just did it all again, filled in as much as we could.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think, a huge takeaway from that too, which still is relatable to today, is like that opportunity to stay connected with your clients, like listening to them and finding other ways to communicate. Like, I feel like now the way that interactions are between business and clients, it's much more personal versus transactional. Not to say that it was transactional before, but like you really got to know your clients in a better way, that in a different way, that probably helped you guys in the trajectory of your business today, right? I think it's quite interesting how that positively impacts the silver lining of the whole experience, for sure.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, we usually, I would say, at least at that point, the like engagement to wedding windows are getting smaller right now, but they used to be like 2 years, some year and a half. So we would usually work with our couples for about that long. But because some of the people's weddings were happening in 2020 and they had gotten engaged and booked us a year and a half, 2 years in advance, we ended up working with some of these couples for like 4 years, like 4 years of being connected with them before we actually played their wedding, which is kind of crazy. But like that happened. There were people that didn't get married until 2022 or end of 2021 that had booked us in 2018. So it's kind of, it did like deepen the connections with some of those clients. And we ended up becoming, especially I'm thinking of a couple families specifically that we got really, really close with and became like good friends with and are still in touch with, that we would send like wine back and forth to each other during the pandemic and like, hey, we're still celebrating you, like those kinds of things. It was just like, it was an interesting and really beautiful opportunity to get to know people better and to deepen some of those connections for sure.
Yeah. Wow. So actually, I wasn't sure if I was going to bring this up, but you mentioned, as you were pregnant with your first child, you decided to leave the business and go into a different role. I'd love to hear more about how that process works, navigating parenthood and first-time motherhood as an entrepreneur, because it is challenging. It's something I'm personally going through myself. And, when I first found out I was pregnant, I'm like, the reality of, oh my gosh, like maternity leave, that doesn't exist, right?
Yes.
So thinking through all that it's been a scary process, but I'd love to hear, if you're open to sharing a little bit of like what that process was for your family.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think like what was really good for us is that over a period of time, like we had started to build a really solid admin team underneath us to manage what we were doing. And like, I basically had somebody who was helping me navigate like the inbox for our couples. And we had somebody who knew like how to book band members. And, I think that was the biggest thing that made stepping away from my business and like deciding to have children, like a possibility, is because I knew that like, okay, they're not going to do it the same way that I'm going to do it, but they're going to do it their own way. They've learned from me. It'll be great. It'll be fine. So going into this, having children and like being pregnant and going through all those months leading up, like we just did the best we could to make sure that we got as much of the information out to the team as possible so that they could take it on. What was interesting is like at the end of, when was this? So I was due like end of December. And at near the beginning of November, I ended up having this like really scary episode where I had like a migraine that mimicked the symptoms of a stroke. And I was like home alone. My husband was out. He was performing somewhere that night and I was alone for the weekend and I was at that point, 8 months pregnant or so. And I literally, like, I lost feeling in one side of my face. I
Oh my
couldn't
gosh.
move my left arm. It was like tingly, and I was like terrified. My mind got fuzzy. I couldn't remember people's names. Like, it was so scary. And I have like a slight history of migraines. Again, like 1 or 2 bad ones a year, but usually, like, they're not this bad. I didn't even know it was a migraine, but like, it was terrifying. So I had to call an ambulance. Like, they had to come
Oh my
get
gosh.
me, go to the hospital. I ended up having to do a bunch of like follow-ups with neurologists and stuff. And basically what we sort of like determined out of doing all of this is like, I was pushing myself way too hard. Like, I was just like you do when you're an entrepreneur, right? You kind of like give your life to your business, and it is your life. And you kind of, I think, at least for me, I've always poured a lot into my work, and sometimes I forget to take care of myself. So that was happening. But I was also super pregnant, and it kind of like totally jolted my mind. I was like, oh shoot, like, I'm not just responsible for me right now. Like, I'm responsible for this life, this like beautiful baby. And like, I need to take care of myself, because in essence, that means I'm also taking care of my baby. And like, it's a wild thing to like, not that I didn't get that, but before that point, but like when it really hits you and you're like in the
Yeah.
hospital, you're like, oh my gosh, like, I need to be better. So at that moment, like, I just stopped everything. It was like probably a month before I was really going to step away, or at least a few weeks. And everybody was just kind of like now responsible for taking things on. And it was a little bit like, I was really nervous about that, but everyone did a really, really good job of stepping in. So I'm grateful we had taken so much time before to prep people. But it also reminded me that I really have to take care of myself. And so, at that time I was like already planning to transition out of running the business and starting a new role. So I ended up just taking that time, taking a couple of months. I took 2 months about 2 months of leave, which was just me not working at all, to spend time with my baby, and the team kind of took over at that point. And then I started a full-time role when my son was almost 2 months old, and ended up diving in there with, thankfully, a boss who was super understanding and gracious with me being a new mom. And I was able to sort of transition into that role. So like, for a while, out of entrepreneurship and into that role. So I was grateful for that opportunity, given the fact that it was stable. And I knew that like there was going to be something there. The world of entrepreneurship is a roller coaster. It's up and down. You can do your best to plan and to project and to know when clients are coming in, but it's not always a perfect science. So, having that role on the horizon was definitely comforting for me. But it's scary. It's scary when you're an entrepreneur and you're going to have a baby and you're trying to take care of yourself and the baby and your business. It's a lot. It's definitely a lot. And my situation was a good reminder to always remember to take care of yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's seriously, you got your hands full with everything as it is with the business, which, like we were talking earlier, it's kind of like your first baby,
Yeah.
right? In
Yes.
some aspect. And so add that a real little child that you have to really take care of and super dependent on you. It's amazing. And I mean, I think obviously you guys were preparing for it by having a team ready, and setting up delegation was probably huge around all this. So taking the steps for it, but then also recognizing it is important for self-care. And even though we all know this, I think sometimes we forget that and don't prioritize self-care. Yeah. So on the subject of self-care, I would love to hear, and I ask this to all my guests, what is a self-care routine that you've added and incorporated into your life that is just a non-negotiable you have to do?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have one, which is that I get ready every day. Like, every day I take a shower, I put on my makeup, I get dressed, even if I'm not going anywhere. It is my non-negotiable. I've literally done this probably my whole life, or since I was like maybe a teenager. Like, it didn't matter. I always got ready. And I think like I am incredibly bad at taking care of myself in major ways. I can say that for sure. Like, I'm not one to like go get a massage or get my nails done or step away from work to go for a walk. Like, that is something that's really hard. And the thing that I love to do most, I'm like, that clears my mind more than anything, is going for a run. But that's not always possible either. With 2 kids, it's been so hard to fit in time for exercise. I also have an autoimmune disease. I have psoriatic arthritis. So I have to be a little thoughtful and careful about how much I physically push myself. So the one thing that I always do is just like, I'm going to get ready. I'm going to get ready for the day. and it's going to set me up for the day in a good way. And I'm going to take care of myself in this one way. So even postpartum, when like I hear stories of like moms not showering for days because they just can't and they have this baby attached to them, that was still a non-negotiable for me. I at least took a shower and I at least put on my mascara and something that was not what I was wearing just before. And I think like having that one staple in my day as a foundation to build from has been my consistent form of self-care that I always rely on to just get me set up and in the right mindset for the day. And then if I can do anything else, it's extra. I know some other things that are really good for me, but yeah, that foundation has been really helpful to me.
That's awesome. I really love that, actually. I think it's something, it does kind of distinguish. It's almost like, working from home, right? And at the end of the day, sometimes it's hard to shut off if you don't like literally maybe close your computer screen. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So like showering, getting ready and like setting something up, it just transitions the moment. And so maybe it might even help with like having time slow down a little bit because it goes so fast. But if you're in the same outfit and you're not taking care of yourself, like it's going to blur by.
It does. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's what I found. Similarly, at the end of a day, when it's time to like close down for the day and get my kids ready for bed, like I put on my PJs, I put on my big t-shirt and my sweatpants and I like, I'm ready for bedtime. But yeah, at the start of the day, it definitely, I think it's not only like a physical shift, but it gets your mind in the right space to just, be present for your work.
I love that. Well, speaking also of mindsets, I saw that you have a mindset toolbox. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Oh my gosh. I mean, let me see if I remember anything. So basically the woman, Julia Pimsler, who runs $1 Million Women, she's a certified mindset coach and she's been trained in NLP. And I learned heck ton from her over years of taking her programs and having her be my mentor. And I think like, there are so many tools that I've used over the years that have really helped me. And I'll share just a few. One thing that she always told me is focus on what you want. I think most entrepreneurs have heard at least this, like, I'm not going to say the quote perfectly, but like what you focus on grows. And so that's always been something huge, is like, it's very easy to get into a negative mind space when things are hard or when you have to put out a lot of fires or when something isn't going the way that you want it to go. And like most people, negativity bias, you tend to have a tendency to hold on to those like negative things and start spiraling downwards. And so the focus on what you want is always a good tool for me to remember to just say like, hey, I'm not going to focus on all this negative stuff that's going on. I'll let myself feel the feelings around them, sure, and process them. But at the same time, like, what can go right? Like, what can I focus on? What can I change? What can I do? There are plenty of things that are out of my control, but what can I control right now? And what can I do about it? So that's been a huge one. I think like I love like win journals and like taking the time to celebrate your wins and actually like physically writing them down on a piece of paper is huge. I think that it's very easy, again, because of negativity bias, we always focus on the negative things that happen in our day. We're like, oh, that client was so hard to deal with, or like, I didn't get enough sleep. But then if you look at the end of the day and you're like, wow, I answered 50 emails, or this one person, I had a great call with them, or my friend reached out to me, or it's sunny outside today. Like, I don't know, just all the good things that are happening in your life. So sort of a mix of like wins and gratitude. I would say like writing that stuff down is always huge. And then one thing I don't do anymore that I want to get back into is at the beginning of the day during the pandemic, when, every day was hard, right? Everyone was like, what's happening? I used to do just a brain dump and I would just write out everything that was in my head and I would just free write for like 5 minutes. And rather than going through the day then with this like heaviness of all the stuff I woke up with in my head, I would go through the day so much lighter because I got it out. Some of that writing would be like, oh, look at all these things you have to do. Like you have to do this and this and this and this. But then like once I was done with it, I was like, oh, it's already out on paper. Now I just need to like put that on my to-do list and I'm good to go. Like it definitely helped my brain. So yeah, those are just a few of the things that I've used that I've found really helpful in the mindset realm.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's the negativity. It's so true because we catch ourselves. It's so easy to get caught into that, right? And then spiral sometimes. And actually yesterday, my husband, it's so fun to say my husband, we just got civilly married on Friday. So I'm not used to saying that. So
congratulations.
Like, thank you. So we were, worried about a couple of things. And I was like, okay, let's stop. What are 3 things we're grateful for? And it just totally like let us take some deep breaths too while we were doing it. I was like, yeah, we got it really good and we've got this, and it felt like really good to like immediately take that negative spiral we were going down and transitioning that. So it's nice.
Yeah.
It's super powerful.
Yeah, it's true. It's great. And just a very quick side note too, like having we have an almost 3-year-old, but we have a toddler who has big emotions and doesn't know how to process them yet. And I think like also navigating that world with our son right now is really helpful in reminding us like that, like, as we're teaching him ways to cope, like you just mentioned deep breaths and stuff like that, like we're teaching him like, okay, you can have the feelings, you can have your little tantrum, and then let's talk about ways that we can cope with these big feelings moving forward. It's like a really good reminder, like to do that for yourself. And it's something like I forget to stop and take deep breaths, but now I'm like coaching my child to do that. So it's easier for me to say like, okay, I can do this for myself too. It's actually like super helpful. I mean, I'm sure you'll find that in a couple years when you're in toddler world, but it's a great reminder as well.
Yeah. And it's something, I don't think I had that in my toolbox growing up. It wasn't something our family, whatever it was, like I didn't learn in school, I didn't learn from my family. And so I didn't know until a couple years ago, like, oh yeah, like breathing, that's really important.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
When you're stressed out, like let's slow down and do that. And so that's amazing. You're teaching your child, your son and soon daughter to be doing that as well. She just turned 10 months. So congratulations.
So she'll get those big emotions soon.
Yeah, that's amazing. So part of the climb, which is sponsored by the Intermountain, of course, we are all about women supporting women. And so in this moment, since I have you here, I would love to learn more about the $1 Million Women and Fund and what you're doing there. I think it would be a great opportunity to support other communities as well. So if you want to tell us a little bit more, that would be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. So specifically, $1 Million Women was started by Julia Pimsler, and it's focused around, well, she was a founder herself, built a company called Little Pim, which was language learning for kids, and went through all of these struggles as an entrepreneur. So she ended up writing a book called $1 Million Women that sort of focused on her story and how she was able to scale her own business. And through writing that book, she really found that I think the stat now is less than 3% of all women make it to $1 million in revenue. And so her goal was really to get more women to make it to and past that $1 million mark. So she started this company that's really focused around providing business training and scaling programs. And so the company overall has 2 main programs. One is a very comprehensive, like the flagship program called the Accelerator. That's a 12-week program focused on scaling and growth of your business with the goal, hopefully, of making it to $1 million in revenues. And then she has a smaller program, a sales program, which is a 21-day sprint that is more focused around helping in sales. And so all of her training really focuses on what I love about it is, as we have just come from talking about mindset, it's like a mindset first. So like before you do anything else, it's like getting the mindset right and learning about, even in sales, like it's not necessarily selling, it's serving. I think like a lot of people have, negative views around sales. You hear, especially growing up, like the car salesman or like those kinds of things. They're just trying to push you to buy something and all of that. Like we all have this, I can't say we all do, but a lot of us have a very sort of, we have an idea about what sales feels like. Yeah, exactly. And so there's a lot of that, just like shifting your mindset that she focuses on first. And then the next step is the strategy and the, how to actually build and how to delegate and things like that. So the programs are there for anybody. And then she really realized that there was this, basically that women of color entrepreneurs, because they face higher hurdles to get to, to make money at all in their businesses or make enough to pay themselves, that they're really the ones that needed more support. That like, how are you going to take this program and pour money into a program if you don't have the resources to do that? So she decided to start a nonprofit wing that provides scholarships to help take programming. So that's what we do, is specifically for women of color entrepreneurs that are paying themselves less than $50,000 a year. They get access to these scholarships to help take the programs, to help them, scale their businesses. And it's just been wonderful to see the people go through the program and have such massive success. I'll give one quick example. One of our star entrepreneurs, Erin Coles, she's the founder of Nude Bar, which is a company, it's a hosiery company, an undergarment company that's focused around rewriting what nude means. So rather than just being white girl nude, it's like nude in all shades for all different skin tones. And so she took our accelerator program and has since raised 3.5 million in seed funding from the birthFUND and Serena Ventures and other VCs. And it's just really exciting to see her grow, and her company has expanded in such beautiful ways. So that's just one example of someone who's gone through the programs that came through the fund. But it's just a wonderful way to see, to kind of try to break down those barriers and really bridge the opportunity and gender and racial gap for women entrepreneurs.
That's incredible. It's been fun. I've been following you on LinkedIn and seeing the successes you're having with them and the support you're providing. So I'm sure they are so grateful to have you leading it as executive director. So amazing. Well, Erin, this was absolutely wonderful having you here. What is the best way to connect with you if anyone wants to?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. I would say that's a great way. It's Erin Coles. On Instagram, it's Erin.Coles. Our business is at Met Players, and the fund is at MDW Fund on Instagram. So follow us in all of those places, and I can send the links to you, Natasha, as well, so you can provide those. But yeah, follow along.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Erin.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of The Climb. Not ready for your journey to end? Make sure to join our online community and subscribe to our YouTube channel to discover your true spirit, strength, and potential today. Details in the show notes below. Need a guide for your journey? Check out our founder, Diane Wong's new book, The Inner Mountain.
Until next time, remember, you're an experiment. Focus on your own path and continue to climb your inner mountain. Thank you.